Howdy, folk in these parts call me Zachary Cush. Now why don't you pull up a seat here next to the campfire and let me spin you a yarn about why I love Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the third Red Dead game and the direct sequel to Red Dead Redemption, which we shall heretofore refer to as Red Dead Redemption 1. Red Dead Redemption 1 is a video game which I have played, but for the most part, it failed to make me feel an emotion, so I don't play it so much anymore. I ain't saying it's a bad game, I'm saying it didn't make me feel nothing. However, especially when compared with its predecessor, Red Dead Redemption 2 managed to make me feel emotions quite frequently. In fact, I would say that Red Dead Redemption 2 is so good that it obliterates any reason to play Red Dead Redemption, which we're going to refer to as Red Dead Redemption 1. I'm here to tell you that Red Dead Redemption 1, it ain't canon no more, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is the only Red Dead Redemption game and should thus just be called Red Dead Redemption, because it's actually got a redemption in it. Red Dead Redemption 2, which is the only Red Dead Redemption game and should thus just be called Red Dead Redemption, is an extraordinarily good game, but it is not great. Now, if some kind of genie rustled forth from a polished brass can of chewing tobacco and granted me 3 wishes, and my 3 wishes had to be about elevating Red Dead Redemption 2 from good to great, these would be those wishes. So sit back, relax, and welcome to Why I Love Red Dead Redemption 2, the 3 Wishes edition. Number 1. I wish there was more stuff like petting your horse. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game about manly men, man in a man's world. What women there are must contend with being women in a man's world. Red Dead Redemption 2 lets you live out the male fantasy of being considered a good person by acknowledging women's issues without being expected to address nor reflect on how maybe you implicitly contribute to those issues. Red Dead Redemption 2 lets you achieve other classically male fantasies, such as discovering your dad's a scumbag, then symbolically defeating him by developing a code of ethics, respectlessly and consequence-freely shooting other men in the head with a gun. And of course, the ultimate male fantasy is saying,
"Go. I'll hold him up,"
to another man what calls you his brother, then dying by murdering other men of less heroism before you can face any consequences for your choices. Despite this, I would honestly call Red Dead Redemption 2 my favorite Barbie's Princess Playhouse game, and I mean that as a point of extreme praise. Now, despite its comfortably boys club veneer of grizzly beards and murdering animals so you can eat their corpses and shooting other people in the head with guns, the most interesting way that you engage with Red Dead Redemption 2 is by minding your character's hygiene, taking care of your horse, and roaming into town to purchase a new precious color-coordinated cowboy outfit for your rough-and-tumble cowboy avatar. And I ain't even being snippy when I say that. I genuinely love taking Arthur into town and treating him to a nice meal and a warm bath and a warm bed. I love that you can walk around camp or walk around town and just press one button to be nice to everyone. I like that one of the things you can be nice to is a dog, and there's dogs everywhere, and you can say hi to a dog and you can pet a dog, because I like dogs, and I like when I see a dog and I go,
"That's a dog, I want to pet it."
I like that I can be nice to Jack Marston and find him a book or whatever, because Arthur kind of always wanted to have his own son, and Jack is now as close as he's going to get to achieving that dream. I like that there's buttons I can push to be nice to my horse. I insist on keeping the frankly slow and gaudy horse that Hosea kind of sort of gives you in Chapter 2, both because Hosea has
"I'm your dad and I'm gonna die later in this story"
tattooed on his forehead, and thus, after that inevitable moment where Hosea dies, the horse would then become a tragic keepsake, and every time you get on it and pet it and feed it a carrot, you get to say to yourself,
"This is the horse Hosea gave me, and now Hosea is dead."
And because, spoiler alert, the moment when your horse gets thanklessly killed in the final Arthur mission was one of only 2 times in my first playthrough where I was brought to genuine tears. I pet and brushed and fed that horse every opportunity I could, and then they killed it in front of me. And here's the thing, partner, is I knew from the start that they was going to kill my horse in the final Arthur mission, because I knew there was going to be a final Arthur mission where Arthur died and then you were going to get to play as John Marston, and that weren't spoiled for me. It's just because there's only 2 interesting things about Red Dead Redemption 1, which is now non-canon. And that's one is that when you catch up to Dutch Vanderlyn, instead of being a really, really nasty villain, he's just kind of sad and pathetic, and his death scene is really sad. And the second one is, spoiler alert, they thanklessly kill John Marston in the final John Marston mission, and then you've got to play the rest of the game as his adult son, Jack Marston. And so when they announced Red Dead Redemption 2, and they said that the protagonist was not going to be John Marston, it was going to be some fella named Arthur Morgan, my first immediate thought was,
If they's gonna kill Arthur Morgan, then you're gonna spend the back half of the story playing as John Marston.
and god darn it, don't they know that happened. And so I knew that Arthur's death was coming, and I picked this horse, what was the horse that Hosea gave me, because I knew Hosea was going to die, and I wanted to be sad that Hosea died. And then when they thanklessly killed my horse, which was something I saw coming, I could be like,
"That's the horse Hosea gave me, and now he's dead."
and what I said, the first time my horse died, I'll reenact the scene for you right here.
Come on! Push Arthur!
My horse! But speaking of folk who ain't horses, I love Arthur. I love being Arthur and taking a bath and getting a haircut and buying some hair pomade and purchasing a dapper new outfit for Arthur. Whenever his ex-girlfriend Mary sends him a letter in the mail asking him to do a Grand Theft Auto mission for her. Now me personally, being Zachary Cush, I sympathize with Mary because she's torn between the safe yet oppressive world of the turn-of-century landed gentry and the free yet highly dangerous life of an outlaw, and she can't make a decision, but then she straight up just doesn't make a decision her way into a sad ending. And for me personally, I refuse to fall in love with any person who can't make a decision. However, when I play Red Dead Redemption 2, I ain't me, I'm Arthur Morgan. And Arthur Morgan's a simp. And one of the things I really appreciate about Arthur is that he ain't me. Another thing I really appreciate about Arthur is that he has a moment where a doctor looks him in the eyes and tells him he's gonna die and it's gonna be a lot sooner than perhaps maybe Arthur was betting on. And Arthur's like,
What do I do with this information?
and I really bonded with Arthur because I got to help him make a decision on what to do with said information. I just kind of find that kind of stuff really compelling, and I wish there was a lot more of it. And I find it more fun and more engaging to do stuff like this instead of shooting people in the head with a gun. I guess what I'm really trying to say here is that my favorite part of Red Dead Redemption 2 was all the stuff that weren't shooting other people in the head with a gun. Like, for example, petting and feeding and taking care of my horse. And look, now I ain't saying that shooting other people in the head with a gun ain't fun from time to time, and I ain't saying it don't feel good or look good or sound good. In Red Dead Redemption 2, they clearly put a lot of work into making shooting other people in the head with a gun feel really good, and that work paid off. What I am saying is that instead of shooting people in the head with a gun, I'd kind of just rather pet my horse. Number 2, I wish killing Micah Bell was more compelling. Now, I don't like Micah Bell, and you might hear that sentence and say to yourself, and perhaps out loud to the monitor you're watching,
Well, yous ain't supposed to like Micah Bell.
but that ain't quite what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't find disliking Micah Bell compelling, and I don't find climbing up a mountain as John Marston and watching Micah Bell get shot by Dutch Vanderlyn very interesting, and I don't think it was a great way to end this story. I don't think that Micah Bell is a well-crafted character, and his only saving grace is that his actor does such a phenomenal job playing him. Good job, man. I don't like Micah Bell, and I don't think he works as this story's villain because his actions don't resonate none with Arthur thematically. You see, the 3 characters in the Red Dead universe who are any interesting at all is Arthur Morgan, Dutch Vanderlyn, and John Marston, as each man is a good man what is wrestling with a giant. Arthur is a good, helpful man who likes helping people, but he's struggling against this outlaw persona what justifies the crimes he inflicts upon his fellows, and he'd rather be helping them. And this struggle sorta gets represented by the honor meter. We're going for high honor denotes Arthur becoming more true to himself, and low honor denotes Arthur losing himself into his twisted outlaw persona. Dutch Vanderlyn is torn between the charismatic patriarch trying to craft a more just, more ethical society what has learned from the mistakes of its past, and a violent, petty, selfish man who just wants to kill and die raging against the encroaching machine because he's trying to lock the present into stasis. And the tragedy of Dutch and why he works better as the villain than Micah is that his worst self wins out in the end. And John Marston is torn between being the itchy trigger-finger outlaw who sees shooting people with a gun as a thing what solves problems instead of starting them, and the responsible family man who's got to be like,
I gotta think about the future.
Attention which gets a lot of cutscenes devoted to it, but no amount of cutscenes can stop one from walking John into Rose and robbing his old friend Simon Pearson in flagrant disrespect to the whole redemption thing. It's just interesting when a character has to struggle, and it's uninteresting when a character don't. There ain't no struggle between the high and low honor versions of Micah. He's just kind of the same guy the whole time, which is why his character ain't interesting, and why it doesn't feel good to climb up a mountain and shoot him with a gun. Now, what they should have done is they should have made Micah Arthur's parallel character. And then you can have that high-low honor thing where the high honor represents Arthur becoming his best self and thus the story's hero. Low honor represents Arthur losing himself to his outlaw persona and thus becoming the story's villain. And whatever you make Arthur, Micah becomes the other thing. And like Arthur is established as being an OG Vanderlyn gang member along with Dutch and Hosea, so why don't we just put Micah right alongside him? How about this? We'll say that Arthur and Micah have both been running with Dutch about 25 years and thus would be his most trusted men. Both characters are relatively good men would employ an outlaw persona to justify the terrible things they do to help Dutch build his utopia, cause they's blindly following Dutch. The player is given control of Arthur and gets to decide if Arthur is to become the hero or the villain. With high honor, Arthur gets tuberculosis, becomes more true to himself, and helps John Marston escape with his family, while Micah becomes a rat what preys on the trust Dutch has for him on account of knowing him for 25 years, and it's weird that in the story Dutch trusts Micah so much even though he don't really know Micah that well. But if Micah be knowing Dutch 25 years, then his villainy is in the fact that he is betraying that that relationship in order to save his own skin, and then he just ends up getting shot by Dutch some years later on top of a mountain. Don't mean nothing if you shoot a guy that you just known for like 6 months. However, if you go low on her with Arthur, then it's Micah who gets tuberculosis, becomes more true to himself, and helps John Marston escape with his family, and it's Arthur who's the rat. Then, when you do American Venom with John Marston, and John Marston is running up this mountain, he's going up there to shoot Arthur instead, and it's Arthur who comes out of here. Wouldn't that be interesting? Okay, look, I'm just saying that this is the final moment of the story, and I wish that it mattered to me. Number 3, I wish Red Dead Redemption 2 ran buck wild with character development. Now, them Rockstar games, Red Dead Redemption 2 included, very clearly idolized the style of Quentin Tarantino. And look, I ain't the kind of guy who's going to tell you the Quentin Tarantino movies are bad, actually. Every Quentin Tarantino movie is great, with the exception of The Hateful Eight, which is kind of alright, I guess. But what Tarantino is he's the Picasso of Hollywood B movies. His films focus mainly on style and pacing and structural tomfoolery. That stuff's great. I'll take extraordinary, technically competent Tarantino movie over some full of itself art house trash what's probably got Jared Leto in it. But while Tarantino's movies dazzle my senses and tickle my brain, they leave my heart profoundly untouched. With one exception that we'll get to later. And that's fine if them's the kind of movies you want to make, but the thing about a movie is they're generally about 2 hours, whereas a Rockstar video game goes on for like 80 hours. And you know, Quentin Tarantino's the kind of guy I'd love to grab a bite to eat with, but he's definitely not the kind of guy I'd want to live with me in my house. And most of Rockstar's fiction, at least what I've encountered, feels like, what if Quentin Tarantino lived in your house? There's an over-the-top filmish characterness to having the straight man protagonist eye roll this exaggerated version of a gross lunch lady, or a guy from the hood, or a guy who's the personification of the amoral impulses of GTA players that I just don't find that compelling. Which mirrors, I think, the reasons why I don't find most of Quentin Tarantino's characters compelling, even though they've got great dialogue. I feel like there's a tepid admittance to this fact in Tarantino's latter works, where he doesn't know what to do with the characters he's established, so he just introduces more. This point is apotheosized, I think, in the Michael Fassbender scenes from Inglourious Basterds, where Michael Fassbender's character is introduced and then immediately killed in the next scene. And don't get me wrong, this is an incredible scene, and if it were a short film, it'd be a 10 out of 10. But it ain't a short film. It's a sequence in a longer film that is wholly disconnected from the broader plot of that movie, what it's a part of, and it don't accomplish nothing except getting some side character killed, and it's never brought up again. And it's like, why'd you put this in the movie if it don't have anything to do with the people in the movie, Quentin? And it's like, why'd you put this in the movie if it don't got nothing to do with the movie, Quentin? The answer, I suspect, is that Quentin ousted the kinds of people what would ask him such questions a long time ago. Speaking of which, did you know that Pulp Fiction has a Roger Avery storyback credit, and it's the only Quentin Tarantino movie what I've seen that has any character development in it? So, by process of elimination, we can estimate what Roger Avery's contribution to Pulp Fiction was. And that contribution, my friends, was character development. And I just think that character development is really interesting. You see, in the beginning of the story, you take a character and you put them in a situation and you have them make choice A. Then, near the end of the story, after we've gone on a little journey together, you put that character in a thematically similar situation, but this time, they make choice B. That's character development. There's character development in Pulp Fiction. Here's what it is. Pulp Fiction, Mia Wallace won't tell Vincent Vega the Fox 4th 5 joke. Then later in the movie, after they've gone on a little adventure together, she does. At the start of his story, Butch Coolidge screws over Marcellus Wallace. Then at the end of his story, once they've gone on a little journey together, he chooses instead to save Marcellus Wallace from being screwed. At the start of his stories, Jules murders some people over a briefcase. Then at the end, after going on a little journey, he goes out of his way to not murder people over that exact same briefcase. That's character development. And if you're gonna have a story, especially a really long story, you kind of need to put character development in there. Arthur, Dutch, and sort of John, I guess, get to go on a little character development journey where they go from a man what follows to a man what follows his heart, a man what is a hero of the people to a man what is a villain to those exact same people, and a man what is a no-good outright crook what neglects his family to a man who does everything he can for said family. And that's why these three characters in particular strike such a chord with me. Now, none of the other characters really get to have any character development, so they ain't got nowhere to go. And when they ain't got nowhere to go, they don't go anywhere, and they don't do nothing. And that's why I don't care when they die. You can't kill a character what ain't going nowhere and expect me to care. And 80 to 100 hours of story content is a long time to not go anywhere, and it's a long time to spend not caring. It's like, look, for example, there's this guy named Kieran Duffy what runs with your rival gang, the O'Driscolls, in the beginning of the story. And in the beginning of the story, Arthur captures him and holds him hostage, and later you free him and he saves you. Then he don't do nothing else except maybe go on a fishing trip with you, and then he just thanklessly dies. It's like, why'd you bring him up? Is it because you needed a guy to die? And like, if most of these characters got to disappear by the end of the story because they wasn't in Red Dead Redemption 1, then like, why not have a little variance to it? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're allowed to greet or antagonize Kieran Duffy, and maybe if you's nice to him, then he sides with you in the final Arthur mission, during the final Arthur mission standoff, and then maybe he dies there defending John and Arthur and goes from a cowardly man what cowered while tied to a tree to a brave man what faced his end bravely. Or, you know, he could survive a meet up with John in the epilogue and maybe work as a ranch hand on the John farm, which then becomes the John Friendship Farm. Or if you do nothing but antagonize Kieran Duffy, then Kieran Duffy's like, I can't trust these fellers. And he rats you out to the Pinkertons. And then in this strawberry scene with John and Sadie and Charles, where they're chasing Cleet, who's a guy I don't care about because I don't know that guy, what if instead it was Kieran? And they chase and capture and hang Kieran, and it's like in the beginning of the story, Arthur chased and captured and clung Kieran to the back of his horse, and in the end of the story, he gets captured, chased, and hung from the neck until dead by John, Sadie, and Charles. But instead, we get this scene with the horse, which ain't that interesting. And it's like, you could have given all these little cowpokes in Dutch's game this kind of variance, so that they could be more like John, Dutch, and Arthur. And like John, Dutch, and Arthur, they could have all been torn between their worst and best selves. And then if you're going to name a mission Our Best Selves, that could have resonated a little bit harder. And, you know, depending on the actions of the player, they either become their best selves or they regress into their worst selves. Those what become their best selves end up on John's Friendship Ranch, and those what become their worst selves either become a shell of their former selves like Dutch Vanderlyn, or they become bullet-ridden corpses like Micah Bell. And there's space in this very, very, very long story for all them sorts of things, but instead of getting those sorts of things, we gotta have 898 scenes in a row where Arthur is like,
I don't know about this one, Dutch.
and Dutch is like,
Arthur, when you won't give me a reach around, it hurts.
Anyhow, that's all I got to say about Red Dead Redemption 2. I like that the game lets me dress my cowpoke, and I like that I get to be nice to my horse, and I like getting to go through harrowing, life-changing events with folk I care about. I don't like that the game spawns a frankly ridiculous amount of people whenever you's gotta shoot folk, so you end up shooting so many folk. I don't like that this camp is filled with so many interesting folk, but most of them don't got nothing to do. And I don't like that there ain't no thematic variance in the story, because that's a thing you can do with a story that's a video game story, and you can't do that with a movie. And games and movies ain't the same thing. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to me chew the cud about Red Dead Redemption 2, partner. I have been and shall remain Zachary Cush, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is just one of them things what's doomed me to become an author.
Is there any way to get this weight off my skin? Find another one. Is there any one to get this right off the wall? Find a new one. Find